Okay, let's take a quick break here and we're going to find out what Ross is enthusiastic about.
Okay.
ProPicks is brought to you by ATB Financial. With $62 billion in assets, ATB Financial is powering possibilities for more than 820,000 financial services clients in Alberta and beyond. ATB's capital markets arm is a full-service investment dealer that offers investment and corporate banking, sales and trading, institutional research, and risk management. Visit atb.com/inthemoney for more information. All right, now it's time for Ross Healy's ProPicks. Your first one is Fortuna Mining. So we know that you love gold. Isn't Fortuna silver?
It used to be called Fortuna Silver when it was 80 to 90% silver. What has happened is that the company has made a huge shift, and it's now little over 80% gold.
Okay.
And it's gold in a stable political environment. The fair market value is about double where the stock is currently trading at. It's cheap, and it's the kind of company that people would look at and say, well, you know, I could just sort of tuck that one away and I wouldn't have to worry about it because it's got a great balance sheet and it's cheap enough. It's about 1.5 times book value. What the heck, and it's in gold, so I don't have to worry about it. That's the kind of stock I think that you want to be in. For Mark from Calgary.
It had a, yes, who loved, good memory. It was Mark in Calgary who asked about gold.
Yep.
It had a big run recently.
Yep.
You'd still like it here. It's still favorable on some valuation.
Well, gold's had a good run recently. As I say, I think we're in the seasonal softness in gold, but so that's a good time. You'd probably, you know, maybe for the next couple of months, if you're going to buy some, you might sort of accumulate it. Don't rush out and fill your hat with it, but accumulate it and hope that maybe in seasonal weakness it'll get a little bit cheaper.
Are they also, you mentioned the jurisdictions that they're in.
Yes.
Is it primarily Latin America?
No. Their gold mine is in the Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast in Africa. And generally speaking, I avoid stocks in Africa. But the political situation here in the Ivory Coast is much better than many countries.
And they sold their assets in Burkina Faso.
Yes.
Did that help?
I don't think it particularly helped, and it wouldn't make any difference anyway. They could just write them off, and who cares? Their property in Ivory Coast is just. I was just going to say it was a gold mine, but I didn't.
You can say that.
I didn't mean to say that. Their undeveloped property shows terrific potential.
Right. Well, okay. Obviously it's
and that's important, because the problem with gold mines is that when you get the stuff out of the ground, then you have less and less in the ground. And in theory, then the value, the long-term value of your holding goes down. So you've got to keep expanding. Okay, you've got to keep expanding your reserves. And my favorite gold mines, that's exactly what they do. And they have just huge potential reserves there, which they have loosely tested, but have no idea how good they could be.
Do you have an upside potential? What's the upside potential of Fortuna?
Yes, but it's so big that I wouldn't know.
You can shock us. Go for shock and awe.
My immediate upside potential would be about $13. $13,
US?
Canadian, I think.
Okay.
However, that would not be where I would expect the stock to go. I would expect to go much higher than that.
So the Canadian price is trading at $9.60. You know, I just like to do the math for our viewers and our listeners.
I think 13 is an easy target.
Okay.
Okay. The harder target is when or occurs when we start getting Americans interested in the gold stocks, and they start looking at these kinds of stocks and they say, "Oh, I mean, here's a nice company. Okay, cheap, good earnings. Like what the heck? I can, I won't even think about that."
Okay. So tuck it away.
So just tuck it away. Yep.
Okay, this next one, nobody likes this stock. It has no buy ratings. It has 6 holds and 4 sells. It is Laurentian Bank. Nobody even wanted to buy the company. It did a strategic review.
Yep.
That review fell through.
Yep.
Tossed its CEO. Now there's somebody new there. Quarterly results showed profit was down almost 20%. But I think the stock rallied on those earnings.
I think the stock was, the market was happy that this company...
happy enough, we should say.
Happy enough to push it up. If I look at my own valuation chart of Laurentian Bank, it's trading at tied for bottom of a 30-year low. Well, when I see a company trading at a 30-year low, and I look at the fair market value, which by the way is I think it's something like 150% above where the stock is currently. It's one of those things that I think it's just a matter of time. If the market does nothing else, I think it starts to ooze higher. However, it's an outstanding purchase for another bank.
But none of them, presumably they all kicked the tires and none of them did it.
Well, we don't know just exactly. The TD, for instance, is now effectively shut out of the United States to all intents and purposes. Where is it going to go here? If the TD owned the company, what would happen would be that by absorbing Laurentian into its balance sheet and its cost structure, my guess would be that the ROE of the company would double in a flash.
We're in for a period of economic difficulties. At least that's what the forecasts say, and you're nervous about what happens in the U.S. So how does arguably the worst of the banks do well in that environment?
It's so cheap and has such a nice dividend that in a sense you've got other problems.
Does the dividend at 6% is sustainable?
Yes, it's well covered. It's already been cut, so it's well covered now. Yes.
The other thing I wonder when it comes to Laurentian Bank, you mentioned that it may be an acquisition target, that it's cheap enough that even in a disappointing economic scenario, it potentially does well. What about the fact that, we don't really know where growth comes from? You need the bank to ultimately do well with profit falling. Does it need to turn around in order for the stock to do well?
I don't know whether it needs to turn around. I think its crippling feature is size.
That it's too small.
It's too small. Yes, and when something is too small, what does it mean? Well, okay. How do we get bigger? Well, they already tried that. Put themselves up for sale. You can muddle along quite happily, and if you're cheap enough, and you've got as I say, you've got a very cheap stock and you got a nice dividend, you can just sit on the thing. That's what I'm doing.
You mentioned that stocks that you won't touch. This is trading at a 30-year low.
Yep.
Stocks you won't touch are when they're trading 40% below book value. That they fall into a blue zone, which is a bad zone.
Yep.
Is Laurentian?
It certainly is.
Okay.
It's certainly down in the blue zone, and
but you're going to be a hero in the blue zone with Laurentian.
Well, there are great opportunities in the blue zone. The volatility of what I call blue stocks. The volatility of blue stocks is right out of sight. It typically can be as high as can be like up as like 100% in a day and down 50% in a day. So it's a great place to find interesting value, but you've got to do a lot of work. Okay, you just can't buy any blue stock and make money on it. You have to, and there have been investment managers who specialize in buying these kinds of stocks, but you've got to do a lot of fundamental analysis. As I say, and so we've done the fundamental analysis.
And it's good. Okay, so that's one of your picks. The third one has done better. It's ATCO. Distributes electricity projects, kind of Canada, UK, Australia.
Yeah.
That's almost boring compared to.
Well, ATCO is boring, but I was looking for something to kind of anchor our portfolio, and a nice utility stock with a decent yield, not exciting, but a decent yield. Cheap relative to its own history. That's the kind of thing that you can put in your portfolio and go to bed at night and not worry. And if it sets back a bit, so what? You know perfectly well that in a year or two you're going to be comfortably on side. So those are the kind after when you've got a lot of excitement in Fortuna and you've got a turnaround in. Potential turnaround in Laurentian, you want something, as they say, that just says, it just sits there and just plods away.
Yeah, that's what it helps you sleep at night. It's like, it's okay,
and that's
but
exactly,
I have ATCO.
that's what helps you sleep at night.
We haven't talked about this, but like, how concerned do you need to be about the bond market? If there's, a spike in yields, these utilities can be vulnerable because you can get higher interest rates elsewhere and something even more stable.
Yes, and certainly that's absolutely true. I would be more concerned about the utilities if I was in the United States, because I would be more concerned about the spike in their yields there than I am in Canada. Right now, we seem to have the Bank of Canada in our corner. As far as the utilities are concerned, as far as yields are concerned.
Ross, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you again.